Welcome back. This is another Pasifika Success Guide. In this one, I'm going to talk to you about citations and references. So what really is in this guide, there's heaps of other good resources out there that teach you how to reference and can show you different kinds of styles, for example, APA style. So I'll be focusing on APA style for most of this video. These other sources that I've talked about, they are freely available from the University of Auckland Library. There's a link that you can click on if you have the PDF of this presentation. And there's also really good YouTube tutorials as well that are better produced than this video, for sure. Okay, so the purpose of this guide is not to tell you how to cite, although I will do that. So it's not really meant to replace these other resources up here that are better, in my opinion, but it's also to teach you how to use references in your assignments, especially for first-year students, and also where to find these references. And I think students often have trouble with these other aspects. It's not just doing the citations. It's not just like putting all the things in the right order and citing things like that. It's also finding the reference to begin with is a big problem for these students. Okay. I also talk about things that are relevant to your assignments, things like formatting your references, and also the difference between in-text and end-text referencing. Okay. So by no means am I the only person to talk about these things, but I'm just putting it together in a package that hopefully is useful to you. Okay, so what are citations and why should we even care? Well, in order to understand what citations are, let's first talk about some terminology. So first of all, sources are the actual things that you read or look at. So that would be books, journal articles, news articles, websites. A citation is what in the body of the text, so say that you're writing a text, in the body of that text you'll use a citation, and the job of the citation is to point the reader to your reference. What is a reference? Well, a reference is what gives the reader enough information to be able to find the source on their own. So if I have a citation in my text that's pointing my reader to this full reference usually at the end of my work or whatever I'm writing, so I have a reference list at the end, and then the reader can look at that reference list or that reference in the reference list and say, oh, okay, now I know how to find that source. And then they can find that source for themselves and read that source for themselves. The citation style is just the way that you format the citation and references. So there's different ways you can do it. You can use numbers, you can use surnames and years as well. For the purposes of this guide, and because it's probably the most popular kind of referencing style, I will be using APA style. The most recent iteration of APA style is 7th edition. So how we normally talk about citations, or if you're at university, your instructor will usually say something along the lines of, you need to provide references with this assignment. And what that means is that when you write an assignment, you need to include citations and references, especially when you are making certain kinds of claims or referencing past work. So why do we use citations at all? I mean, it might be obvious to you at this point, but I think a broad, big idea here is that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. Because there's so much knowledge throughout human history, it's all accumulated. So much of new knowledge, especially scholarly work, or the basis of scholarly work, is drawing on past work that other people have done and using that to inform your own ideas in the present. Okay, so we need to acknowledge past work, but we also need to back up what we're saying. So sometimes we make claims, and those claims are not just made up usually. If we're doing scholarly work, they're based on other work that people are doing, so we need to back up and give some credibility to whatever we're trying to claim. Okay, in the context of university studies, especially as a student, you also include citations to show that you have scholarly research skills. So when we say scholarly research skills, that's the ability to go and find citations and use them in a way that's effective. Okay, so just using citations shows that you have those skills, hopefully, and a much more banal reason to use your citations is that for most university courses, if you don't use your sources or citations, you will lose marks. Okay, it's not just using citations as well, it's using them correctly. So when do we use citations? This is a kind of a big question, but basically, I like to break it down like this. It's when you are making a statement that needs to be backed up. I already mentioned that. And that's when the reader, in a situation when the reader needs to know where you are getting your information. Okay, so an example of this is, imagine that you are writing something or making a statement, and someone across from you was asking, okay, well, how do you know that? Or according to whom? So for example, you could make a statement like, the most popular religion in New Zealand is Christianity. And imagine someone sitting across from you having a coffee, a friend of yours maybe, saying, well, how do you know that? You say, well, actually, this is based on this source, and you give them a citation. Okay, this is not really common in real life when you're speaking to people. Maybe it is common with some academics, but at least when you're writing your assignments, it's very much like this. And the other reason is also just to give credit where credit is due. So you need to acknowledge the work of the other people that you're using in your own work. Okay, so if you make your own work someday, you would want other people to acknowledge that work when they use it. Okay, so for example, just saying the first study of whatever religion in New Zealand, you need to give that person credit for what they did, even though they'd probably be dead if it was from 1830. Here's an example from a paper that I've written, co-authored with these two authors, these two great people. So just to give you an example of, in a scholarly research article, this is something that's been published when you would use citations. So I've highlighted it here. If you look with international historical statistics, I'm using this when I'm talking about the estimated rates of worldwide fertility. Okay, so I can't just give these numbers here. For example, the period between 1950 and 1955 were 4.97 and 3.86 and so on and so forth. I can't just say that. I also have to say where I got these from. Otherwise, someone could very reasonably come along and say, well, where did you get those numbers? Okay, are you just making them up? And it's a real problem actually in outside of academia without citations. People just say numbers and give statistics on social media as well, and they don't give citations, and it's hard to know how credible they are. Okay, so some more examples here. East Asia is especially affected by declining birth rates. South Korea, blah, 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 blah. There's a reference for that. Okay, and you'll see the same pattern with the other references in this paragraph.